He was riding the foamless swell of an ocean, fresh and cool after the fierce temperatures of heaven, but warm by earthly standards, as warm as a shallow bay with sandy bottom in a subtropical climate. As he rushed smoothly up the great convex hillside of the next wave, he got a mouthful of the water. It was hardly at all flavoured with salt. It was drinkable, like fresh water, and only, by an infinitesimal degree, less insipid. Though he had not been aware of thirst till now, his drink gave him a quite astonishing pleasure. It was almost like meeting pleasure itself for the first time.
This is Pints with Jack, Season 8, Episode 25, Perelandra Retrospective. Welcome, friends, to Pints with Jack, your favourite C.S. Lewis podcast run by three Thalcandrians. In the opening to this episode, you heard C.S. Lewis himself reading the section of Perelandra where Ransom arrives on the planet. And this is a special treat because we have now completed all of our Perelandra-related episodes, and so all of the co-hosts have returned to come together and have a little bit of a retrospective on the book. Gentlemen, welcome back. What have you been up to since we last recorded together?
Let me guess, Matt has been building a business with AI.
Yeah, I thought single people, well, at least people without kids were meant to be more interesting, but that's just been his answer for months now.
Oh, and let me guess, Andrew, there's a new C.S. Lewis conference you're going to go to, or new scholar you've chatted with, or the book you're working on, or some new first edition to advertise.
All of the above. You got it. And then let's see, what do we think David's been doing, Matt?
Oh, it's got to be something with being a father raising his kids.
I think that there's some diapers involved.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wiping poop. It's what I do.
Looking at his hair, it looks like he just probably woke up at like 4 a.m. and has not had a chance to shower because of a whole bunch of stuff.
No, it's called sleeping with a toddler when they roll around like a crazy person, kicking you in the bladder and worse, and then trying to actively sleep on your head.
Wow.
In this book, we've been talking about the innocence of the lady. I had Lucy do one of the most innocent things 2 nights ago. What we do in night times after we've bathed, brushed teeth, we all get into the bed. I read a book for Lucy and Alexander, one that Lucy really likes, like Hello Horse, or the story about Emma the hedgehog. And then once we've done that, we then pray, and then Lucy kisses the boys, and then Mummy takes her into her room. And so Marie said, "Lucy, kiss Daddy." And she came in very sweetly to kiss me. She was like this vision in pink, lips puckered, and then she's just like about half a centimeter away from my mouth, belches in my face, and then gives me the sweetest kiss ever.
Oh, wow.
I love
that. That's great. Actually, Matt, you're actually not too far from wrong. I just did an interview for the Optimistic Curmudgeon podcast with Josh Herring, who I met over a year ago at the Davenant Spring Convivium, Davenant Institute. And Josh is one of our academic track presenters at the C.S. Lewis Conference, which, as we're recording this, is 3 weeks from today, May 2nd and 3rd. So we've gotten sponsorships from the C.S. Lewis Institute Orlando and the C.S. Lewis Foundation. Ticket sales are going. We got 1 more week for early bird discounts. And that may be extended. And volume 40 of the Journal 7 just came out. This is the Wade Center's journal of kind of Inklings-related publications. And for the very first time, all of Joy Davidman's letters from 1952 have been released. None of them were in Don King's book. So Don edited those letters from 52, 25 of them, and they are just incredibly eye-opening. I've been digging around in them for years at the Wade Center, but now there's a physical and a digital copy of those. And speaking of Joy Davidman, I can't say anything official, but there's something on the horizons with her. So there's that. What about you, Matt? Tell us about your business, or just give us the business.
No, you weren't far off. I mean, that is genuinely the sole focus. And in the home stretch, our data provider, we're going to be turning on production version for that, which takes about 4 weeks to finalize with all of the financial institutions. So That'll take a little bit of time, but hopefully in 4 weeks, we'll be bringing some test beta users on to figure out all the edge cases and bad parts of the code that I didn't think through and ways it breaks. And then I'll ruthlessly reach out to David for help with assistance of how I'm supposed to fix these things. But yeah, for listeners, I don't know if I've really fully explained it, but like in a sentence, probably the best way to describe it is like, imagine like Dave Ramsey's best advice coupled with a high-end financial planner that works with people with kind of multi-million net worths in budget apps day to day, all coming together in one, but then massively enhanced and automated and integrated with AI. So it's meant to be like your pocket CFO that's always with you anytime, anywhere, answering questions, real-time tracking, build a financial plan. It'll update it, it'll adjust it. It'll tell you, David, I know you set this budget. I know that means you're going to have this much at retirement. I know it's going to mean you have this probability to success, but you keep blowing through these 3 categories. I think we need to adjust your plan, but maybe with a little bit more nurturing. So really a truly automated CFO is the idea, like someone financially illiterate. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful term, but just has never been trained in that. Doesn't matter. It will do it all for you.
Hearing you talk reminds me of something I forgot to do. It's right here on my to-do list for this week. Become a multimillionaire. So I better get on that this next week. We'll see how that goes.
I think the point is you don't have to be a multimillionaire, but it's like you have the expertise of a financial advisor who is used to dealing with multimillionaires.
Okay.
That is correct. That's the whole point of this. So typical financial planning advice that goes way beyond budgeting, like truly accumulation strategies, withdrawal strategies, tax optimization, 529s, all that stuff are typically reserved for people where a financial advisor can charge 1% fee. Let's be real. And so they don't help people that don't have $1 million. This will be accessible. All of that information, I coded it all in, then the AI works with it for like a typical subscription service of any sort of SaaS thing you've got in your life.
Great. So you're saying that I can take the to-do list of becoming a millionaire off my list.
Mm-hmm. It'll help you get there, actually, Andrew. So let me rephrase that. You will become a multimillionaire using Wealth Architect.
And sold.
I would love it if it spat out the advice, either quit ministry or become a prosperity bot gospel guy.
Yeah, there we go.
The beautiful part, though, is if you do ask it a very basic question, because it's all built this way of like, what would it take for me based on my current income and living expenses to be able to do this? It will go through your budget and say, if you want $1.5 million of retirement or $2 million of retirement, there's only going to be one way. Like there's only levers that you can pull on.
Stop eating.
At 59, I think the app is going to probably laugh at me. What are we drinking today, guys?
Actually, I didn't really think about that, Andrew. You don't have a lot of time left to make that happen. Time is the key.
Unfortunately, I am not drinking anything carbonated, but I have brought out my Oxford mug and I'm having my typical second cup of coffee.
Well, I'm rocking the tea today because we're recording this in the morning and I didn't get a chance to go out and get a coffee because children were being bonkers this morning. Matt, how about yourself?
I am drinking what is just absolutely incredible. Athletic Brewing. I am a new big fan. This is dethroned Guinness Zero for me. Still love Guinness Zero, but this truly tastes like a beer. Guinness Zero tastes like Guinness, sort of, but anyways.
It should taste like a
and
stout.
Celsius, because I am in the home stretch of coding, and so my sleep is not great the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, if Athletic Brewing would like to send us any swag, please reach out to me. I will send you our addresses.
Or create a caffeinated, non-alcoholic beer. That'd be great too.
Oh, hey, were we going to talk about annual Patreon memberships?
I was just going to mention that as afterwards, but yeah, just FYI for folks that support us on Patreon. Thank you very, very much. And we're turning on the option to allow for annual memberships, which means that rather than paying every month, you just pay once for the year and you get a 10% discount for doing so.
Great.
And Andrew, we are toasting Kaylee McGrain. Would you mind doing a little ad hoc toast?
I would love to do a toast to here. Kaylee, we toast you this morning as we are entering Holy Week. Palm Sunday, the day after tomorrow. And we pray that this season of Christ's resurrection will fill you with joy. You will even be surprised by joy and the goodness of God. So cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right. So because this is a retro episode, a little bit of update on the season before we actually dive into the book. What's coming up next? So we've read through Perelandra. We then had a month of interviews with Lewis scholars about some aspect of that book. Next month is going to be Jack's Bookshelf. And this is where we look at the books and authors which have really shaped Lewis. And this season, we're looking at Aristotle, Wordsworth, Graham, and that was the chap who wrote Wind in the Willows, and T.S. Eliot. Then after that, we're going to have Narnia Month, where we're going to be joined by Lazo Major, Lazo the Greater, Lazo the Favorite, so Andrew's wife. She's going to join us, and we're going to talk about the Narnia movie, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but the cartoon version. So what we're going to do is we're going to now start moving through the adaptations of Narnia in chronological order, which means we're also going to have an extra special episode just before that, looking at the black and white version, live action. It's kind of amazing. Really looking forward to getting into that. But after that, we're going to also do some more interviews with scholars. We're going to be looking at the literary influences on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Actually, it's the first few. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. In looking at the book Paths in the Snow. And then we're going to be looking at Narnia and the Fields of Arbol. This was a request from some of our slackers asking us if we could do something on the Inklings and ecology. So that's what's coming up in the next couple of months.
Lovely.
But let's talk about Perelandra. Before we actually get too far into this, gents, do you have some general thoughts that you want to share before we start talking about favorite lines and favorite themes of the book?
You know, Lewis talks about this as one of his two favorites. We know what the other favorite was, but this is just so sweet.
So we can't trust this opinion either. Okay.
Wow. You mean the one that you just enunciated? Yes, I think that it would be unwise to trust that opinion. I love the sweepiness. I love the you have this combination. I mean, Lewis has got this great kind of geographical imagination. He said that he would sometimes lie in bed and imagine landscapes and things. And so you've got these kind of sweeping landscape scenes that he writes with great detail, but you also have kind of the internal struggle. So there's so much of Screwtape in here, the focus on love. And I think that this is where Lewis is really starting to churn and grow some on love on the planets. And so this is one of the really kind of nascent fictional books. It's only his second real kind of straight fiction, and he's really kind of finding his stride. And it's masterful. It's high up there in my Lewis reading.
I would absolutely second that. If I had to put in one singular statement, what's so profound about this book is it does what he didn't think he could do with the reverse of the Screwtape Letters. So he felt like he could really easily get in the head of a demon, but it would be hard to describe angelic thought. Well, to some degree, that's sort of what he did here, not angelic thought, but to be able to somehow communicate a truly rightly ordered living creation, life, the pleasure that's experienced, being drawn up into some divine will. It makes me think of, let me see it here, I have it somewhere in the notes, that quote of, you just can't imagine to walk out of his will is to walk into nowhere. Like he sort of describes that in this book so beautifully well. And so I think, which is a little bit unique for me to say this, as I say it out loud in real time here, it's kind of a profound thing for me to be saying, more because, as we've talked about with Diana Glyer and on other episodes, I just prefer like the mere Christianity. Don't give me this fiction crap of trying to have me experience something. Just tell me truth. Here you do feel it. And he's not actually communicating. Yes, in some of these dialogues, there's truth coming out and you underlying stuff. And you're like, that's super wise, how he thought about the way that the bad angels held on and didn't want to be raised up. The other one, like there's some profound wisdom in actual statements in this book. But just overall, it's the experience that draws you in.
Well, and so we see him about 10 years later, 12 years later, saying that his job is catching the reader unawares through fiction and symbol, writing indirect theology. And this is, some of what he's doing here. And so he's really kind of coming into his own, I think, in some ways with it. What do you think, David?
Well, I just wanted to comment on Matt's comment, and he said that Lewis is doing what he thought he couldn't do with the reverse of the Screwtape Letters.
Yeah.
I would say perhaps he didn't feel like he could write angelic thought, but he could reach as high as unfallen man thought. So he could do us in our original innocence.
Yeah.
because the angels only really speak a little bit towards the end in that rapturous couple of chapters. I still think he reached it regardless, but...
Well, and he's doing this before he realizes how hard it is. And this is also about 10 years before he tries to write a book on prayer and can't do it. And so I think that this is his best attempt. And then later on, when thinking about maybe writing the opposite of Screwtape or whatever, he realizes that he can't. But I think that he writes this before he really realizes how hard a task it is. And I think he gets pretty close. He gets pretty far down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my refrain throughout this season is, this is some of the best prose you're ever going to read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I would agree. And I don't think it in the Lewis community it gets that credit. I would be curious if somehow this could, in the popular world, like most of my friends, if I had to ask them, they've read obviously Screwtape Letters, Mere Christianity, Great Divorce, some of the more like classic names, but many don't stumble across this. And I have a feeling that people would love it. Like I wonder if maybe Out of the Silent Planet stops it. Out of the Silent Planet was wonderful, but it wasn't quite to this magnitude of like drawn into the experiential. And so maybe you read one and you don't come to two or what, but like I think this one standalone could win people.
So I think that has something to do with our company, because a lot of my friends growing up, in reading Lewis in the last 30 years, a lot of my friends are fiction readers. And so when we talk about Lewis's work, this one is rapturously praised as one of the first ones. So I agree. I mean, there seems to be this dichotomy, especially amongst apologists, where they're like, oh, we don't like this fiction stuff. Just give me the straight miracles things. And some of that is a matter of taste. If they don't like fiction or science fiction, that's fine.
They're wrong, but it's fine.
They're wrong, but that's fine. I had a reading group once, and after the first Chronicle of Narnia, because mostly of 1 or 2 out of the 7 or 8, we decided, the decision was made not to read any more fairy tales. And, I think that folks
Peasants.
are missing something, and so I think it depends on kind of where you approach. If you're going to Lewis for apologetics and philosophy, it's going to be more couched in story. But I came to Lewis through Narnia and then a reread of Narnia and then getting my hands on everything I could. And I always have loved stories. That's how I've been oriented. So I think it may depend on kind of where your taste is and where you're oriented, because as soon as folks read this, a lot of times the reaction is really, really strong.
I think you're kind of making my point too, that I love this, because probably the way I'd phrase this to put it in a little bit more like data-driven terms. I was just looking up Amazon, Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe, Screwtape Letters, and Mere Christianity, all plus or minus a couple thousand, around 20,000 reviews. So similar levels of popularity, millions copies sold. This is about 10%. And so I think my thinking is exactly what you're saying. If more people read it, like if all the people that read Mere Christianity read this, now many just aren't fiction readers or something, I think people would be just as drawn in, and it wouldn't be 1/10 as popular. It would be equally as popular. Like, I think this is such a profound book. If you gave it to all of them, they'd be like, oh, I'm so glad you gave this to me.
Yeah.
But I would say I think it's a harder read. Another thing I've said throughout the season is I've found this book tiring. Not that I haven't been enjoying it, but just that it has demanded so much more from me.
Right. You really have to attend. And I think that when Lewis is writing genre, that's the same thing. When people really read Till We Have Faces, there's a really powerful draw to it, but it's, and as I've been thinking about writing my own criticism of it and hoping to kind of open it up like Michael Ward did with the Narnias, it's going to be a harder sell because the book is a harder read. Like Perelandra, Till We Have Faces is more of a genre novel. It's a modernist novel. It's a psychological novel. It's a retold novel. It's a feminist novel, and so it's not as mainstream. And also, like with Narnia, unlike with Narnia, people don't get that as a kid. And the Narnias work for children and for everybody, every age afterwards. So I think Narnia gets a lot more repeated readings. And so in terms of kind of the broad general audience, not surprising that Screwtape Letters, Mere Christianity would have that kind of popularity. And if people hear science fiction, they may dismiss it because of their preconceived notions of science fiction. So, and David, I think that your point is really good, that some books of Lewis's demand more attention. And sometimes, especially in our age, people are not really up for that.
And I've also said that the first time I read this book, I took it down in one gulp. Really enjoyed it, but I got so much more from reading it with you guys, chapter by chapter. This thing I also keep on saying, it's like Lewis needs to be read slowly, carefully, and in community. And then you just get so much more out of it.
That should be our tagline. Pints with Jack, slowly, carefully, and in community. Like, I feel like there's something there of like, we go chapter by chapter. It is a community. But maybe it's like C.S. Lewis, slowly, carefully, and in community.
And with a pint.
Or just deliberately and in community.
Yeah, that's a good
There
way to
you
do it.
go.
Deliberately and in community. Yeah, we don't want to maybe preference we're slow. Excuse my friend
Speak for
over
yourself.
here.
The other thing that I think that might tie into where Perelandra fits in the conception of Lewis, and it definitely is one of the second-tier books, not in quality, but in terms of that people will come to. There are much more obvious choices. For his fiction, for Narnia, there are lots of adaptations. So maybe what the Space Trilogy needs is some better adaptations. I mean, we spoke about doing an adaptation of Out of the Silent Planet, and I think that would be completely doable. And Perelandra, I think, would be harder, but I think it would work really well as a radio play. And it's funny because I actually I pre-ordered it on Audible for the new BBC adaptation of That Hideous Strength, which we will go into more detail, obviously, in season 10 when we actually do that book. But they really rushed through that. It was in 2 parts. I think it was about an hour each. The first hour was great. The second hour was just like a breakneck speed. Ransom is in it even less than he is in the actual book, which is pretty terrible. But I do wonder if we could maybe get some adaptations of Ransom's adventures, if that wouldn't provide more of a doorway to make these works better known.
Usually when I find people having a particular problem with this or that in C.S. Lewis, their comments usually betray the fact that they haven't read it carefully enough or read him carefully enough. And I don't want to say that like a snob, but like, charges of racism, charges of sexism, if you actually read what Lewis actually wrote, most of those charges go away. But part of that is because of our hasty society. I mean, people are not spending the kind of careful time attending to things, which is part of why we are so glad for our listeners who not only have read Lewis, but are willing to listen to us go on about him. And we're grateful that that's part of what's happening. So
actually, while we're on the subject of adaptations,
boy,
how would you try and adapt Perelandra? Do you think my radio play idea is good, or do you think they could actually make a movie out of it? And if we could do that, who would you cast as Ransom, Tor, Tenadril, and Weston?
So doing a movie is always reconceiving the whole story. And that's the problem that I've had with some of the movies is I'd want somebody who really understood the story theologically, literarily, and I'd want a Lewis scholar to be in the ear of the director. But I mean, that's nearly impossible. And that's just that's a mad wish. I wonder if, although I thought he was a little bit quiet in Freud's Last Session, Matthew Goode, who played Lewis in Freud's Last Session, might be a good Ransom. He's kind of an everyman, not very strong. He doesn't look like a big burly character. And I wonder if maybe he could do it. He's about the right age.
To some degree, could you argue that Avatar is slightly like Perelandra?
No.
And could you, if I had to envision, it has to be different. I'm not pretending it is Perelandra, but I feel like there's a 50% overlap with the idea and the way that, the reason I thought this was, one of the things that captivated the world about Avatar was the way it drew you into this beautiful, pristine world. And so to the extent that kind of suggests there is a role for this kind of movie, and if it's done right and draws in the part that drew me to the book, I think it could be fantastic. I think, unfortunately, because it's like single character dialogue with a third one, I think you'd probably have to deviate from the script a little bit and add some stuff to really make it a little bit more, or else it's going to be like Nefarious meets Avatar. It can work. Dialogue can do the heavy lifting, but I think, unfortunately, you probably have to deviate a bit from the script. But I think there could be something there.
Sadly, because of the crash boom of, so many action movies where plot and literary device are so absent, and because conflict is at the heart of this, it would be hard to see the movie, the movie industry not trying to make this into a Marvel action movie.
Well, that is what Avatar
with
would
the conflict, but the conflict is as spiritual as it is physical, and once again, you'd have to have some sensitivity and subtlety. And if you were a Christian making the movie for every audience, trying to appeal to your average moviegoer, maybe you would have to kind of hide the spirituality in a way that Lewis seems to have done a little bit in Screwtape. A priest once wrote to Lewis and said, your advice in the Screwtape letters almost in places seems positively diabolical.
Yeah, that was actually to The Guardian. He was canceling his subscription.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I think it would be a tough task. I think The Chosen has done that, has taken the original, added to some of it, remained true, and there's kind of some heartfeltness to it. But I think it would have to be done really carefully. And this wasn't a bestseller. This did not make Lewis a household name. And so, I don't know. I'd love to see it.
You just gave a good analogy. Marvel meets Perelandra gives you Avatar. I mean, yeah, which we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
The Chosen meets Avatar is what you do want. Something like that. The beauty of the world of Avatar met with the Chosen type of narrative. Little bit of discretion. Unfortunately, you're probably going to need a little bit of that here. But try to stay true to the story. If they do that, I think you got something. Maybe we have to call up Angel Studios.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking through possible casting. And so I was just pull up a big list of actors and actresses. I think Liam Hemsworth, he could be our Tor.
No.
I think that would be great. I think that'd be wonderful.
Okay.
But if we really wanted to sink it, we could have Rachel Zegler be Tenadrill. Because she did such a great job on marketing Snow White.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, and I haven't thought about Tor and Tenadrill.
Yeah, it would be difficult. In fact, do you know who I first thought of for Tenadrill? She was the love interest in Lord of the Rings. Liv Tyler.
Liv Tyler.
Because she could definitely project the innocence that Tenadrill has.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be very difficult to do, not least of which, because in Perelandra, there is a lot of nudity.
Yeah, that's true.
So there would have to be some very carefully placed fig leaves, I think.
All right. So Claude thinks Dev Patel would be good for Ransom. He has the intellectual presence and spiritual depth needed for Ransom. His performance in The Green Knight and Lion demonstrated his ability to both portray vulnerability and inner strength.
Plus masculinity with that amazing moustache that he's got.
Actually, the more you think about Lion, you could actually see him being good for something like this. The Green Lady, who is this? Lupita Nyong'o?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the African act. Yeah, I think she's from Africa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was in Wakanda Forever and Black Panther.
Yeah.
Oh, the Unman, Professor Weston possessed by evil, Cillian Murphy.
I think the nudity question actually kind of begs an interesting comparison to Lewis wrote an essay called Prudery and Philology. It's in his collection Present Concerns. And he brings up a really interesting point. He says, if an artist draws an unexpurgated nude, like a nude not omitting any details, if there's a nude model and the artist draws it, he can draw all of the bits, right? Without any compunction, or a statue maker, whatever. He said, if a writer then describes what the artist has written, when he gets to the private bits, he has a political choice to make. He can only use a scientific word, a dirty word, or a baby word, right? There isn't a word in English to describe the private parts that doesn't have a tinge to it. You can draw it, but you can't write it up. And so in terms of the nudity, I think that they'd probably have to avoid that altogether because it would just get so weird. Maybe drawing costuming them in kind of shapeless things where they're more or less nondescript. But then you lose the whole piebald thing, and I don't know.
Well, actually, the one thought I had there, if you've ever seen the X-Men movies with Mystique, she is technically naked, but they managed to, put enough stuff on her to, get it past the censors. So they could theoretically do something like that. Matt, you looked really happy a moment ago. What did you just find? What did the AI tell you?
Yeah, a different one. I always go back and forth through all three. It's how I do use them now. But Owen Ransom, it actually came with Weston, both Cillian Murphy again. This time also Adam Driver. I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
But then Owen Ransom had also, this one threw in Benedict Cumberbatch. So imagine a Benedict Cumberbatch meets a Cillian Murphy or Adam Driver. That could be a powerful dialogue.
I wonder if he's probably too old, but Javier Bardem might be a good Weston.
Yeah.
That kind of glowering thing.
Oh, she could play American-Irish actress Saoirse Ronan, who played Lady Bird.
Saoirse.
Yeah, she could play the Green Lady really well too.
Who's actually, I think she's rumored for the Narnia movie, but we won't go into that. Even though our listeners, I'm sure, are ready for us to pounce all over.
I was tempted to choose Meryl Streep for Ransom, but
oh wow, too soon.
We'll punt that into the future. I personally still think that they're just trying to create controversy to create advertising. I don't think they're taking that seriously. For whatever that's worth.
And somebody pointed out that it comes from, it's from no official source, and it comes from a hate bait site.
Mm-hmm.
And it's certainly being effective. People are losing their minds, and I don't want to go into it.
Even if they are trying to do it, we don't know motives, no put intent. The one thing I'll say is I was like, they did the smart thing, which was drip it, get the response. There's no way they go with it after that response, seeing what happened with Snow White.
I do not know. So, anyway, let's carry on.
Yeah, let's kick things off with some favorite lines, and then we'll move into talking about favorite themes. Any particular lines that you guys really liked from the book?
Well, funny you should ask, and not that I prepared beforehand. But it says, thus, while one part of Ransom remained, as it were, prostrated in a hush of fear and love that resembled a kind of death, which, of course, is a foretelling of the last line of Till We Have Faces. Long did I hate you, long did I fear you, I might love you, and then she prostrates herself. And so, in this version of, we're going to call the novel, instead of Perelandra, I think we should call the novel Unget. So there's a foretaste, and it goes to my point that, that Lewis is echoing all over the place in his last novel.
Well, Andrew, in your lack of quote preparation, if you need some, there's a ton in the bottom. Just scroll down in the actual document. Matthew has put a bunch in there with the help of Gemini.
Did you spell that Maitttheu, Matthew? Matthew?
This is an interesting one. Listeners, obviously, Andrew's preparation for Pints with Jack was 25, 30 years of scholarship. And so when he comes on, he just brings his wisdom every time, and it works great. But when you have to prep a bunch of quotes.
25, 30 seconds of talking to an AI.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Oh, I love it. But anyways,
boy.
I actually really liked, there's a couple, they play right on each other, but when the Bible used the very expression about fighting with principalities and powers and depraved hypersomatic beings at great heights, it meant that quite ordinary people were to do the fighting. And very related to that, he says early on, don't imagine I've been selected to go to Perelandra because I'm anyone in particular. One never can see, or not till long afterwards, why anyone was selected for any job. And when one does, it usually is some reason that leaves no room for vanity. And I always thought that was a cornerstone of Lewisian thought, the profound humility that comes from recognizing our part in the story is far larger than ourselves, where significance is bestowed, not achieved. So there's just no ground for pride, which is something we've talked about pretty greatly in here. And it was something that stuck out to me in real time.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines was related to that, where we're told, be comforted, small one, in your smallness. He lays no merit on you. Receive and be glad.
Yeah. I also love the thing in chapter 11. I think about it a lot. And so it may not be specific quotes, but some of the ideas, right? That it may boil down to actual physical effort and confrontation. Or in chapter 11, there had arisen before him with perfect certitude the knowledge, about this time tomorrow you will have done the impossible, right? And, this idea that this thing seems completely undoable, but in an hour, in a day, in a week, it will be done. And that, to me, has provided a great deal of kind of ordinary, everyday courage. It seems impossible, but, what is in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit? Let's go.
Here goes. Here goes. Yes, that was one of my other ones. But that was also something that came up with Dr. James Como when I read his book Mystical Perelandra. I didn't really think about where this theme is in other Lewisian books, and it's everywhere. How do they escape from the underworld in the silver chair? Well, it's not through argument. They're losing argument, albeit through also magic and drugs. But it comes from a marshwiggle stamping on a fire.
Mm-hmm.
How does the only person that gets saved in the Great Divorce achieve it? He just surrenders. He says, "Okay, do it."
Yeah.
And from that, his lizard gets killed, and he's transformed and rides on a stallion into heaven. I'm starting to see it in many more places in Lewis's books that words have their limits, and there reaches a point when you just have to obey. You just have to do the next thing that you're called to do.
Yeah.
I kind of related to all of this is we're talking about the way we're called into pretty remarkable battles, but in ways that don't lead to vanity. But I did like, Andrew, related to your chapter 11, where he says, "A stone may determine the course of a river. He was that stone at this horrible moment, which would become the center of the universe." And so you kind of see here that immense weight and dignity bestowed upon individual choice. And it is remarkable how much you do see that in Lewis's works, where individual choice does play in, agency plays in. You see that in Screwtape Letters. You see that in here. You see that in Melicandra. You do see that in the Narnian stories. There's something empowering about that. But then we've also already talked about it, or just before these quotes, the way that it's done where you can't take vanity for it. So it's like that both and to some degree.
It was funny. I started pulling out my favorite quotations, and I noticed they started coalescing into a number of different themes. So one of them is related to the choices that we make and how God works in those choices. It's the great mystery of free will and predestination. But two of my favorites were, "Whatever you do, he'll make good of it, but not the good he had prepared for you if you had obeyed him." And another line where it says, "God can make good use of all that happens, but the loss is real."
Yes.
That is such a good one. That's so far my favorite.
And, it's worth saying again that one of the things that makes Lewis so remarkable is the cohesiveness of his thinking. So if you, as you're pointing out, David, if you notice a theme in any book, chances are, without trying to go and proof text it, chances are, if it's a theme in one book, it's probably going to resurface in most of his books. And so there are so many different themes that Lewis is sounding. Now, if an author only sounds one theme every book, that can be a little bit dull. But the length and breadth of the thematic approach and reach of Lewis, and then the fact that you can hear echoes of that in everything that he writes. It brings to mind again Owen Barfield's statement that what Lewis thought about everything is secretly present in what he said about anything. And this at the retrospective, I think that we're proving that point again.
Wonder, David, if this can be applied to what you said. A little bit different phrasing, but then if I can put an image to it. The world is so much larger than I thought. I thought we went along paths, but it seems there are no paths. The going itself is the path. And kind of related to that, we see later that idea, let me see if I can't find it, to walk out of his will is to walk into nowhere. Like kind of what you were talking about there, where he's going to make good of anything because his will is going to be done, is going to play out. If you reject it, it's things, you're the way I almost think about that is imagine these waves. The waves are going forward. Are you surfing the wave or are you being tumbled in the wave? You really have two choices there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something beautiful about that as well.
That idea of shall we not receive the wave that Maladil sends us?
Oh, is that? Oh, look at that. Well played, Andrew. Way to bring it home.
I do think that there is scope for a series of C.S. Lewis branded surfboards related to this book.
Absolutely. The Jade Surfer.
I do like this. I'm thinking about the forbidden. That would be a strange thing to think about what will never happen. I like that. The beautiful practicality of innocence. I thought that was great.
And transitioning it into more broadly the themes, with each of these quotations, we've been touching on the theme that's behind it. One that is repeated in the book is about the nature of sin and the nature of innocence. And we said right at the beginning, and we think that Lewis does this masterfully. And I would say it's the consistent thing that he does in all of his books, along with his master, George MacDonald. He makes goodness attractive.
Mm-hmm. Achingly beautiful is the word I would use.
Yeah, the Green Lady is not insipid, is not boring. She is mysterious and wonderful and breathtaking.
You know what he does too? I felt like related to that, making communion with God, or in this case, Maladale, tangible as the air. Because for us, we talk about having our wills aligned with him. We talk about being in communion. It is rare you meet individuals, but I do believe you do on this earth, where you can just tell that it's a tangible reality for them. For myself, it's more of a struggle and an abstract idea. But I do meet people from time to time where it truly feels tangible. It is absolutely driving, and it's like a substantial force that they actually couldn't fight against if they wanted to, because they're so in tune. You kind of get that sense here.
You feel like they've got a direct line.
Yeah.
When the book talks about Maladale just putting in things into their mind and the closeness of the relationship, it makes you want it.
Yes.
And one thing I hadn't mentioned throughout the entire book, but I kept meaning to, is Lewis is absolutely stealing from Tolkien here. If you go into the deep lore about the elves and about how their communication and mind-to-mind sharing, it's all there already. So excellent thievery from Lewis there.
Related to that, the nature of sin, or in this case, innocence, both the other side of that, I will say where pleasure was met with gratitude and not a desire for more was tangible to me, because that's kind of related to the being in the line with God's will. I think I've done a decent job nipping in the bud my desire for more, but it's not natural. And it's not it's almost as if pleasure is not met with gratitude for me, because it's just going to mean now I'm going to have to resist this. You go to a really nice dinner, or you have something that's just really delicious, or an experience like a really lovely trip. And those are wonderful. But then my thought is wanting more and more and more. And then I have to nip it in the bud. And it's I wish I just had the natural disposition to experience, then set it aside. Then it comes again when it comes, experience, set it aside, not the constant cycle of I have a desire for more, 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 but now I got to resist this desire.
The vulgarity, like asking to hear the same symphony twice in a day. Well, I can tell you it's baked into human nature, because small people, they got something that they like. What's the first thing they want? More.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah.
Lucy comes into my office because I have these, they're like dried banana chips. And she absolutely loves them. We call them banana crunchies, named after a very cute book. But Lucy will just come into my office and stand next to me and go, up, la, which is put me up in your lap. And then she sits there and she goes, and then points behind my monitor where she knows these things are kept.
She's adorable. Oh my gosh. Well, so at least when she's belching, it's banana belching.
Oh, exactly. Sweetest belching in the world.
Oh, that's great.
The final thing I'll say from my side on the nature of sin and innocence, I did appreciate how Lewis demonstrates the fragility of it, though. That even if you are in a state of innocence as a lady, their choice is important in cooperating in it, in resisting evil and temptation. And so I think he kind of demonstrates that dance quite well.
Well, and it's interesting to note that right around this time in 1940, Williams comes to Oxford. They get all excited. The Inklings get all excited that he's there. And they arrange for him to give a lecture on Comus from Milton at Oxford. And Lewis goes on and on about it in his letters. He writes 5 or 6 letters where he mentions that it was, purportedly about Milton, but it was actually a lecture about chastity. And he says about Williams, Both in public and private, he is of nearly all the men I have met, the one who whose address most overflows with love. It is simply irresistible. Those young men and women were lapping up what he said about chastity before the end of the hour. It's a big thing to have done. And so chastity was not a virtue that was embraced in the 40s. And Lewis kind of raves about how Williams makes goodness attractive. And that's some of what he's achieving, I think, here in Perelandra as well.
Not really. It's embraced today either.
Yeah.
Or ever.
Well, the Victorian age and, the medieval period and, but
whether that was the virtue of chastity or just prudery is subject to argument, I think.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about favorite lines or themes? Because there was one more thing that I just wanted to briefly touch on.
Please.
Well, it was one of the questions from our Slackers. So I said, is there anything in particular you wanted to talk about on the retrospective? And the question was raised, how has this book affected your understanding of Genesis? That was Jake Dean's suggestion. He said, I wouldn't mind hearing more comparisons of the book has to Adam and Eve. I liked what you guys spoke about last time, especially the part about Adam not intervening when Eve partook of the fruit. But I'd take anything related to that, assuming that there is more to explore. And actually, the person we toasted today, Kaylee, she brought up one point that I'm glad she did, because it's actually something that you said, Andrew, that I disagreed with, but we were running low on time, so I didn't go and fight you on it. Okay. And it was the question of work before the fall. She suggested, and I would agree, that work isn't a punishment of the fall. It's the fact that the nature of that work changes. Because before the fall, they're still given work to do, namely to look after the garden, to guard and protect it, to tend it. But what changes after the fall is that they are now having to work by the sweat of their brow for their food on an earth that is now hostile to them. Any thoughts?
I'll let Andrew go first.
I'll let Matt go first. What does AI have to say? I don't even remember what I said that you disagreed with.
It certainly sounded like you were couching work as being a punishment of the fall. In the curse for Adam, that by the sweat of your brow, it will bring forth
well, it wouldn't be unlike me to be hasty and to overstate and then try to figure my way to shore from there. I wonder if maybe work by the sweat of the brow, right? Mm-hmm. Work as a painful thing, work as an onerous thing, work, that might be what the punishment is, because they were working in the garden beforehand. They were tending and it wasn't burdensome to them.
Yeah.
And so, and it kind of echoes what Tinadril's attitude, that all is delight, right? And she loves, being with the animals and everything. So that's probably where I'd land.
And in Perelandra, at the end, we hear about all of Tor's projects. He's got thousands of years mapped out as to what they're going to do. They're going to...
Sounds like someone we know.
I bet he had a spreadsheet. I know he did.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure he did.
For adjusted thoughts, I would use a different word than adjusted. I think I was getting hung up with the adjusted thoughts. I'm not sure Lewis is trying to adjust them, but maybe enrich or illuminate would probably be the words I would use.
Look at Matt defining with precision. Way to
go. Define and describe, my son.
Yeah.
Well, I was struggling. I was like, I don't know if it's adjusted them, and I was really wrestling. But I feel like you can see the psychological battle of the temptation. It's so short in there, and it's just a quick succumbing. And since it does, I know there's going to be different views on our listeners here, but there's an argument to be made that it kind of happened, not necessarily as quickly maybe it did, and we don't really know the time and all that played out to some degree. Maybe there was more of a psychological...
That it's a mythic retelling.
Yeah, that there might have been just more time playing on. I thought it really helped understand the fixed land. Why was this in place? I think at least we got more enriched thoughts. I'm not sure it's 100% clear, but if someone were to come to me and say, well, why can't you eat from the knowledge of good and evil? What's the point of keeping this from? I do actually feel like I could answer that better now that I have read Perelandra than I would have been able to before. And obviously, most importantly, which the fall does not do a great job on, is beautifully show the state of the garden beforehand and richly, which is a big why for getting back to that state. And maybe the very final thing, because I can see Andrew itching.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
It introduced sort of Lewis wasn't saying that the fall, they could have prevented it Because notice that this was a post-Jesus. We saw that somewhere in Perelandra where it talks about this is post-incarnation. So they also had an advantage this time around that wasn't necessarily present before that allowed this to play out. So I think there's also a bit of sympathy placed in there. They almost felt like they were alone, and this time they were not.
So in terms of the time of the temptation, we don't know how long that temptation went on in the Bible.
Yes.
If it was a short time, then maybe God allows this temptation not only to go on longer, but then to add somebody there to prevent. Maybe God is doing a new thing in this iteration of a new world and, increasing the chances of success. And that's what always struck me when the indefatigability, the tirelessness of temptation and the banality of it and the boringness of it. And why, ransom. And he's going on and on and on and on. And we don't know if the enemy was there for a year before Eve finally succumbed. I think that if we don't know what the timing was, but maybe this is because God never does the same thing twice. Maybe this time, he brings a weaker tempter, not Satan, but one of his cronies, right? And he introduces one of the Lord's cronies, one of the Lord's servants, in order to balance the scales.
And that was actually a related theme that I should have mentioned earlier when we talked about our place in it, rejoicing in our smallness, but at the same time, realizing the great condescension of God, that we are invited to be his ambassadors, his co-workers that can affect the salvation of others, or in the case of Ransom, the saving of an entire world.
I love that.
Well, any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
Well, one of the things that this season proves is that Lewis, if he's worth being read, he's worth being reread. This book certainly bears rereading and careful rereading. And the other great pleasure that I got this year, this season, is I've read Perelandra a number of times, but to have to really talk about all of it, I had to slow down and not skip over some of the parts that I skip over in order to get to the parts I think I can't wait for.
I feel like I need to read this paragraph. That was the final paragraph that Gemini put together in summarizing our 150 pages of notes. And this could be like the excerpt for, give it a scale of 1 to 10, your view that this should be on the back of the book of Perelandra. Looking back, Perelandra is so much more than just an imaginative story. It's a rich tapestry woven with threads of profound theological insight, breathtaking world building, and deeply human, even when depicting the unfallen journeys. From these poignant lines that echo in the mind long after reading, to the epic sweep of themes like spiritual conflict, the luminous beauty of innocence, and the thrilling hints of cosmic order, all set against the familiar backdrop of Genesis, but reimagined with stunning originality. Lewis invites us into an experience. He challenges us to perceive reality with fresh eyes, to consider the true nature of good, evil, choice, and the staggering scope of God's love. Perelandra leaves us perhaps with echoes of its golden waves and fragrant winds, a renewed sense of wonder at the beauty woven into the fabric of reality, and a deeper awareness of the profound adventure, the high stakes involved in our own walk of faith within God's unfolding story. I think that's pretty good.
Except for the first line. Read that first line again.
Looking back, Perelandra is so much more than just an imaginative story.
Okay, and nobody who's going to buy the book needs to know that, that we need to say that about Lewis. But the rest of it is, I think, pretty good.
Yeah, I'm suspicious. Anything coming out of a talking head that isn't that isn't truly human, I question its source. Speaking of which, next season we're going to be doing the abolition of man, and the season after that, but that will be a short season. So next one will be a short season, so we can then get on to that hideous strength and finish off this trilogy. And all of my comments about heads will hopefully become clear if you haven't already read it.
I do want to preface for listeners, if you go to Google Gemini and you try to get it to rewrite this, the reason this built, what I actually do think, and Andrew probably slightly appreciated that summarization, it was given 150 pages of our show notes. This was not it thinking naturally. This was honestly more it synthesizing all of the thought of David, Andrew, and Matt throughout the seasons, but it has a long enough context window that I'm not kidding. I fed it in preparation for this, every one of our show notes. It was 157 pages in a Word document, and had it synthesized. So that single paragraph, it's not its natural brain. It's a co-pilot with us. That's probably why, Andrew, you were like, oh, that is actually okay, because a third of it is you.
From the best of us. Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And as we wrap up, one other thing that I want to say, if in recent episodes you've had a very faint sound of salsa music in the background, it was Andrew's cables. I think the protection on them had degraded slightly, and so he was picking up radio waves, and he was picking up a Latin music station. So you had it very slightly in the background. You'll probably hear it better in any of our videos, like our common room. But he now has new cables, so the Latin music ends here.
Although my Latin heritage will just go on.
David, did you find other ones or the 25-foot ones?
No, I found 3-foot ones. That was more than enough. Matt is ready to podcast from the bath or in the neighboring apartment, I think.
An image I don't want to entertain.
No. And on that gross note, I hear the call for final drinks. So thanks to our intern Julia, our sound engineers Taylor and Sarah. Thanks to our patron supporters, particularly our top tier supporters, Dan, Jody, Robert, Mark, Mary, Margaret, Rowdy, Angela, David, Peter, Kate, James, John, Sarah, Rebecca, Megan, Brian, Joanna, Kelly, Stephen, Gary, Paul, Kay, Becca, Shane, Thomas, Amanda, Joelle, Erica, Matt, James, Bud 1 and 2, Edgar, Aldo, Kevin, Mark, and of course, all of you for listening.
So please join us next time
when we'll continue going further up
and further in.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheerio.